An Arab billionaire looked at Ozzy Osbourne and said something no one in that room expected to hear out loud. Not a whisper. Not a joke. You don't belong here. Those 4 words hit harder than any scream or guitar riff Ozzy had ever played. The room froze. You could feel it. Glasses paused midair. Conversations died halfway through sentences. Even the music seemed to lose its rhythm. Because this wasn't just an insult. It was a judgment. A verdict passed in seconds, based on appearance, reputation, and assumptions. Ozzy Osbourne, a man who had sold out stadiums, survived addiction, buried friends, and lived through things most people couldn't even imagine, was suddenly being told he didn't belong. Not because he lacked success, not because he lacked influence, but because he didn't fit the image. And in that moment, every person watching felt something familiar. Because almost all of us have been there. Have you ever been judged before anyone truly knew who you were?
Think about that.
Not criticized for your actions, but dismissed for your presence. Judged by the way you looked, the way you spoke, where you came from, your past mistakes instead of your growth. People decided your worth before you ever opened your mouth. That's what made this moment so powerful. Because this wasn't just about Ozzy Osbourne. It was about the silent battles people fight every day. Walking into rooms where they already feel like outsiders. Trying to prove they deserve a seat at the table. And here's the uncomfortable truth. The people who judge the fastest often know the least. They see the surface, but never the scars underneath. In that frozen moment, Ozzy didn't just represent himself. He represented everyone who had ever been underestimated, looked down on, or told, directly or indirectly, that they didn't belong. And as the silence stretched on, one question hung in the air. Would Ozzy break? Or would he redefine what belonging truly means? Because what happened next was about to turn judgment into regret, and silence into shock. The hall glowed under layers of soft, golden light. Not bright, controlled. The kind of lighting meant to flatter wealth, not expose it. Every surface reflected money. Polished marble floors. Walls trimmed with gold and rare wood. Crystal fixtures hanging like frozen chandeliers of power. This wasn't decoration. It was a message. At the entrance stood private guards. Not uniformed police, but silent professionals in tailored suits. Earpieces hidden. Eyes scanning. Men who didn't ask questions because they already knew the answers. Inside the room were people the world rarely sees together. Billionaires whose names never appeared on Forbes. Royals whose power came from bloodlines older than nations. Oil tycoons who controlled resources capable of bending governments. These were not celebrities. They were decision-makers. Conversations were quiet. Voices never rose. Laughter was restrained, measured. In this room, presence alone meant power. Access was everything. Invitations were not requested. They were granted. One wrong name, one wrong background, one wrong reputation, and you simply never crossed the door. And then there was Ozzy Osbourne, dressed simply, standing without an entourage. No throne of influence behind him. A man whose life was built on distortion, rebellion, and chaos. Now standing in a world that worshipped control. While others spoke of empires and investments, Ozzy stood quietly, absorbing the atmosphere. He didn't blend in. He didn't try to. His presence felt misplaced. Like a thunderstorm inside a museum. This wasn't a concert. This wasn't a backstage party. This was a room built for power, not rebellion. And everyone could feel it. The contrast was impossible to ignore. And that's when the tension began. He wasn't just rich. He was old money, the kind that doesn't announce itself because it never had to. His family's name was whispered in boardrooms long before Ozzy Osbourne ever stepped on a stage. An oil empire, built decades ago, stretching across borders, contracts, governments. Money so deep it no longer impressed, it commanded. He was educated in Europe, spoke softly, moved carefully, every gesture calculated, every word measured. In his world, order was power. Hierarchy mattered. Appearance mattered. Reputation was not just important, it was everything. You didn't raise your voice in rooms like this. You didn't stand out. You didn't disrupt. And then there was Ozzy. Messy. Unpredictable. A man whose life had been lived in headlines, controversies, addictions, and survival. To the billionaire, Ozzy didn't represent success. He represented chaos. A man who broke rules instead of honoring them. A man who survived storms instead of avoiding them. A man who wore his scars openly instead of hiding them behind tailored suits. The billionaire watched Ozzy from across the room, not with curiosity, but with judgment. In his eyes, this gathering was sacred, built for men who controlled the world, not men who challenged it. And Ozzy Osbourne looked like someone who didn't understand the rules, or worse, someone who didn't care. That's when the thought formed. Not anger, not jealousy, but certainty. Certainty that Ozzy didn't belong in his world. Does success give someone the right to decide who belongs and who doesn't? Because in that moment, the billionaire believed it did. And he was about to say it out loud. Without realizing he was standing across from a man who had already survived judgment far harsher than his. Ozzy Osbourne didn't come from wealth. He didn't grow up surrounded by chandeliers, bodyguards, or influence. He came from a working-class neighborhood where survival mattered more than status, where dreams weren't encouraged, they were escaped to. From the very beginning, Ozzy was labeled different, too loud, too strange, too broken. And when fame finally came, it didn't polish him, it exposed him. Ozzy's battles with addiction weren't hidden behind closed doors. They were public, messy, humiliating. While elites whispered behind champagne glasses, Ozzy fought demons most people would never admit they had. He fell. He relapsed. He was written off. Critics laughed. High society mocked him. They called him unstable, unworthy, disposable. But here's what they never understood. Ozzy survived. While others with perfect lives collapsed under pressure, Ozzy kept standing. Scarred, imperfect, but unbroken. He buried friends. He buried versions of himself. And somehow he kept going. Ozzy wasn't polished. He didn't speak the language of power. He didn't wear the mask of respectability. He was real. And that terrified people who live their entire lives pretending. Because nothing threatens the elite more than someone who has nothing to hide. Someone who has already been to hell and isn't afraid anymore. The billionaire didn't lower his voice. He didn't lean in. He didn't whisper. He spoke loudly. Loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. Then the next. Then the entire room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Laughter died instantly. Even the background music seemed to fade. All eyes turned. Ozzy stood there. Black jacket, silver rings, decades of scars hidden behind tired eyes. While the words landed like a slap across the room. You don't belong here. Not said with anger. Not said with emotion. Said with certainty. A statement. A verdict. Cameras that had been recording moments earlier slowly lowered. Some guests looked away, embarrassed. Others leaned forward, curious, waiting to see if Ozzy Osbourne would finally snap. This wasn't just an insult. This was public rejection. A powerful man telling the world, you are not one of us. Seconds passed. Long seconds. Ozzy didn't move, didn't speak, didn't smile. Inside that silence lived everything. His past, his battles, the years of being laughed at, written off, nearly destroyed. The billionaire stood confident, arms relaxed. To him, this moment was over. He believed he had won. But what no one in that room understood was this. Ozzy Osbourne had survived things far worse than humiliation. What would you do if your dignity was challenged in front of the world? Would you explode in anger? Would you walk away in silence? Or would you stand still and let your truth speak louder than your pride? Because what Ozzy did next was something no one in that room was prepared for. The billionaire's words still hung in the air like a storm cloud. The crowd froze. Phones lowered. Eyes darted between Ozzy and the man who dared to insult him. Everyone in the room braced themselves. They thought Ozzy would explode, shouting, storming off, throwing his hands in frustration. After all, this was a man known for his rebellious spirit, his unpredictability, and his legendary temper. The tension was palpable. Some even leaned forward, waiting for the first sign of confrontation. Others silently wagered that Ozzy would quietly walk out, leaving the billionaire and the room smugly triumphant. After all, this was a world Ozzy didn't belong in, right? Leaving would have confirmed their assumptions. Seconds stretched into what felt like eternity. The air was thick with unspoken words. Guests exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or to just watch the fireworks. Even the billionaire's confident smirk wavered slightly, though he masked it. In this silence, something remarkable happened. Ozzy didn't raise his voice. He didn't stomp out. He stood still, calm, almost meditative. His presence alone seemed to bend the room's energy, forcing everyone to reconsider their expectations. Every second was a battle of wills. The billionaire waited, convinced he had won. But the room, and Ozzy, were about to prove otherwise. The room was silent. Every eye was on him. The billionaire's smug grin began to falter, sensing he might have underestimated this rock legend. Ozzy took a slow breath. Calm, steady, unshaken. You know, I've been told I didn't belong my whole life, he said, his voice soft but cutting through the tension like a blade. In pubs, on stages, and boardrooms, people always thought I was out of place. Too loud, too raw, to me. He paused. The silence amplified every word. I've nearly died more times than I can count. I've hit rock bottom and clawed my way back again and again. And through all of it, I learned one thing. He leaned slightly forward, locking eyes with the billionaire. Respect isn't given because of wealth, or status, or power. It's earned through pain, through survival, through proving you can rise when everyone expects you to fall. The billionaire shifted in his seat, his confidence cracking. Even the guests, accustomed to wealth and authority, felt a ripple of awe. So yes, Ozzy continued, his voice now steady and commanding. I've been told I don't belong my whole life. And yet here I am. The words hung in the air, not as defiance, but as undeniable truth. The power had shifted. Quietly. Completely. The billionaire's confident smirk falters. He shifts in his seat, unable to maintain the air of superiority he had just moments ago. Guests, who had been silently watching, began exchanging glances, some shocked, some impressed. Murmurs ripple through the room as the energy changes. The people who had sided with the billionaire now find themselves questioning their judgment. For the first time that evening, the power dynamic has shifted. The man who believed he could define who belongs is now speechless. And in that pause, everyone realizes the truth. Ozzy Osbourne didn't need permission to belong. His presence, forged in struggle, demanded respect, not approval. Cameras capture fleeting expressions of awe, disbelief, and newfound respect. Even the billionaire hesitates, his voice caught in his throat, realizing that influence and wealth cannot command the respect earned by a lifetime of survival. The tension is almost unbearable, the silence thick, until slowly, respect replaces arrogance in the room. Is true power found in wealth, or in surviving what money can't fix? Pause here to let viewers reflect and engage in the comments. This moment works as both a turning point in the story and a philosophical hook, perfect for retention. The billionaire, who had seemed untouchable for most of the night, finally broke his composure. He stepped closer, his tone softer, almost hesitant. I underestimated you, he admitted, quietly but clearly enough for the entire room to hear. Guests exchanged glances, realizing the power dynamic had shifted. The billionaire offered a subtle handshake, more than a gesture, a public acknowledgement of Ozzy's place among them. Ozzy didn't boast. He simply nodded, his calm presence saying more than words ever could. The silence that followed was heavy, but it carried a new respect, one earned, not demanded. That night, the room didn't change Ozzy. Ozzy changed the room. He proved that true respect isn't given to wealth, titles, or appearances. It's earned through resilience, authenticity, and courage. The cameras captured the moment, the murmurs grew into applause, and even the most skeptical guests couldn't ignore the truth. Ozzy Osbourne belonged. No one could take that away. Never underestimate someone who has survived hell. They've faced battles most people can't even imagine. They've fallen harder, fought longer, and come back stronger. Because they don't ask to belong. They arrive already proven. That night, Ozzy Osbourne didn't just earn respect. He reminded everyone in that room that true strength isn't bought, it's earned through fire. And that's the reason legends always outlast the doubters.